You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
We got a lot to cover up.
So guys,
what's going on?
Greg Kading is out. His lawyer won't let him do it, so
we've been waiting around for Kading all day, and
yeah, and now
he's not
he's a
coming.
no-show.
Really, I wanted to talk to him because there's so much to ask him.
Yeah.
Puffy was going up the stairs, and he said, I don't care if Tupac died, I don't care if Biggie gotta die, and I don't care if Suge gotta go to prison for the rest of his life.
We got a confession letter on how everything went down and who's responsible.
Now, getting back to Russell was following in the footsteps of his dad, and he was able to work through the LAPD and have all the things that had to be done within the LAPD. He certainly knew the streets very well, and circumstances in his case were far more tragic because he was killed in the line of duty.
If that's the case, did Tupac life mean anything? Because they never saw that case. Sometimes if you saw the first case, you might have saw the second case. But that never happened, correct?
Yep.
But he did testify reluctantly. The Death Row Records security chief Reggie Wright Jr. once told him, quote, "We're going to get those mothers who downed Pac."
Through interviews of former police officers that worked in the Death Row organization, Mack and Gaines were identified as confidants of Suge Knight, the owner of Death Row Records. They were present during private death row parties, and that's where first time that we were able to really make the connection between those two.
She don't want to get caught in a situation. That's why she was going to snatch the money from Knight and them, and there don't be no money, because she can't see the big picture, and she don't understand the big picture. She don't understand the master and how it can be levied and how we can go and do what we need to do with it. She don't understand that.
Ice and I, we've heard consistently, Suge, that you're the person behind the hit on Biggie.
Well, they looked at y'all and told y'all a fat-ass lie.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Reg was good friends, and Perez and Sarita and Reg is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot.
A reportedly missing photograph and former police chief Bernard Park's daughter came up during testimony today in the wrongful death lawsuit filed against the city by murdered rap star Biggie Smalls' mother.
That, to me, was probably another motive for Chief Parks to want to squash a lot of the information. There was an effort to keep a lot of the information away from the public.
This declaration from a jailhouse informant named Kenny Boagni links crooked LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez to the murder of rap star Biggie Smalls.
Okay. Right? You see, Suge was willing to say, I didn't know those two cops, but maybe Reggie knew them.
Never met those dudes. They never worked for me. They knew Reggie right. They didn't know me.
He always would say, those are Reggie people.
And Reggie was fast to say, I didn't know them either.
I was just interested in why he would point the finger at Suge so quick. He wouldn't say it to you, but he definitely pointed it. We call that dry snitching.
That Perez told how he worked security for Death Row Records the night Biggie Smalls was assassinated, and how he and Mack used cell phones to set up the hit. Boagni now says he was instructed by an LAPD detective to share his story with no one else investigating Biggie's murder. Judge Florence Marie Cooper says LAPD may be involved in what she calls deliberate and intentional concealment of information. Jailhouse informant Kenny Boagni ties former LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez to the murder of rap star Biggie Smalls. LAPD has withheld reams of other evidence as well, including at least 2 other jailhouse statements implicating dirty cops Mack and Perez in Biggie's murder. 1,000 pages of information were withheld describing Mack and Perez's involvement in Biggie's murder. 3 different jailhouse informants who offered to wear a wire were all turned down by LAPD. A wire, say informants, that could have caught jailed officer Perez boasting about his involvement with Death Row Records and the Biggie Smalls murder. Judge Florence Marie Cooper lists all the new information she says links former crooked LAPD officers David Mack and Rafael Perez to the murder of Biggie Smalls. The sheer volume of the information, says the judge, belies any LAPD argument that it comes from just another jailhouse informant.
Murder is pretty simple. The first person you go after is the spouse.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Reg was good friends, and Perez and Sharita and Reg is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot. Those guys, if you go back and watch the film, they was already stalking Pac, watching him. So that just tipped the iceberg when something happened. But there was a plan already to do something to him. Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? He was actually a good kid too, you know? I'm quite sure if they saw the first one, they would saw the second one, because it's the same circle of people.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
Okay, this is the Russell Poole theory of the murders of Tupac and Biggie. And now we have Snoop Dogg coming off his murder trial. And just previous to his murder trial wrapping up, he was trying to set up a deal at another record label. He was trying to move over to Warner's. He was using Death Row Records resources to record, and he was going to release those albums through Warner Brothers. Suge Knight found out about it, and he sat down and he explained the facts of life to Snoop. And he told Snoop, no, you're not leaving. You're staying, and this is how it's going to be. Now, there was a $6 million fee that was racked up, and that $6 million needed to be paid back. So it was going to be a long time for Snoop, if he stayed at Death Row Records, before he would ever see any money. And so Snoop is pissed. He's pissed because he's not seeing money. He's pissed because he has a $6 million fee to pay back. And he's pissed off at Suge Knight. You have Kevin Gaines, pissed off at Suge Knight. Sharitha Knight, pissed off at Suge Knight. David Kenner, pissed off at Suge Knight. And now the plotting begins for how they're going to topple Death Row Records and how they're going to take out Tupac. Don't forget that many of these were cops, and the cops hated Tupac. So you got cops that hate Tupac, you got Reggie Wright Jr., Reggie Wright Sr., you got Kevin Gaines, Sharitha, Snoop, Rafael Perez, David Mack. And they're a well-oiled machine, and now the target becomes Death Row Records. The rift between Tupac and Snoop starts to become bigger. We have the Roseanne Barr show, You Don't Bring Me Flowers, that Snoop's supposed to show up with Tupac. You have the House of Blues, where Tupac outshines Snoop. You have the incident in New York on September the 4th, where there's a huge rift between Snoop and Tupac. And now this rift has just grown to the point where it is out of control, to the point that Snoop thinks he's going to be killed on the flight home. He's got a knife and a fork, and he's sleeping under a blanket with one in each hand, ready to attack whoever comes and tries to kill him, because he thinks he's going to be killed on the ride home. So things have clearly gotten to the point where there's no ability to patch things up. And everybody is feeling like they're being victimized by Suge. Suge is drunk with power. He changes the record label's name from Death Row Records to the untouchable Death Row Records. And so Suge is drunk with power at this time, and it's clear that he needs to be taken out. And they're probably getting flack from the nefarious sources behind Death Row Records, gangs and crime families and what have you, saying, what the hell are you guys doing? You're creating way too much attention. And the other thing that's happening is the attention by the feds and by the task force that's investigating Death Row Records is heightening. And so it's time that they have to do something if they're going to keep this record label alive and maximize the value that they can all pull out of Death Row Records, they have to take out Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Well, Tupac is growing increasingly upset at the record label because he's not actually seeing the benefits of his recording. Yeah, they're bringing him over leased cars. They're dangling leased homes. They're letting him rack up bills at the Peninsula Hotel, but the money is not actually ending up in his bank account, and that's part of the strategy that Death Row Records had in dealing with all of their artists. They would give them whatever they wanted, but they wouldn't actually pay them. They didn't want them to have enough money so that they could set up their own recording sessions, so that they could hire their own attorneys and accountants and their own agents and managers and what have you. And so they tried to dry out the artists as much as they could. They tried to keep them drunk, they tried to keep them high, keep producing, keep making albums, keep making revenue, but they didn't fatten the bank accounts of the artists, and that was part of the strategy. And so Tupac started to even sour a little bit about Death Row Records. And there was the confrontation that happened between Tupac and Suge, because he had heard Snoop on the radio, and he felt like he was riding with Snoop in his murder trial, but that Snoop wasn't riding with him. And he was right. Snoop had his own agenda. Snoop had his own thing going on. There was a plan that was going on behind the scenes that had nothing to do with Tupac and Suge other than seeing them dead, and they were not in on the plan. And David Kenner goes to court with Tupac, and he, at court 3 weeks before Tupac and Suge are shot, he gets a plea bargain entered in a possession charge that Tupac, in a California case, is going to show up in Las Vegas, and he is going to perform for cops. Now here's the cop killer whose sentence is he has to go perform for cops. Can you imagine how difficult that would have been for Tupac to perform for cops at an event? And that's his punishment for a possession charge, and David Kenner's the one that makes the arrangements. Now, there's an awful lot of Death Row Records people that are ex-military. Rafael Perez, ex-military. Kevin Gaines, ex-military. Nate Dogg, ex-military. And there's more. And so they are familiar with tactics. They've been using these radios and these scanners. They used it at the party at the Mark Anthony Bell incident. David Mack would use radios and scanners in his bank robbery. They were very skilled at doing covert operations. And so the Tupac murder becomes a covert operation, just like the others that they had done, that they had orchestrated. Reggie Wright Sr. is speculating at Lake Mead who is going to run Death Row Records if something happens to Suge. Michael Moore happens to be here. He hears this, and everybody talks about how Sharitha would run the label, but then, no. Reggie Wright Jr. would end up running Death Row Records if something happened to Suge. And so the fact that they're speculating about it means that they're planning, means that the thieves are now figuring out how they are going to steal the wealth of Death Row Records. And so this is the catalyst that has now got this whole plan in motion to steal the wealth of Death Row Records.
Murder is pretty simple. The first person you go after is the spouse.
All the artists at Death Row was willing to come with me.
David Mack worked for you, right?
No, ma'am.
Never?
Never met him, never heard of him. Didn't know who he was until the accusations that he possibly did work for me. And that's been investigated by LAPD and all of that.
3 different jailhouse informants who offered to wear a wire were all turned down by LAPD. A wire, say informants, that could have caught jailed Officer Perez boasting about his involvement with Death Row Records and the Biggie Smalls murder.
Why would I want a paper trail when I never brought him around nowhere? So if I'm going to hide him in secret, you think I'm gonna let somebody catch a paper trail? They were paid cash by Snoop.
Perez is a good friend of David Mack's, who both were good friends of Gaines.
Perez and them was all involved. They were trying to kill me too, but see, because Perez and Rez was good friends, and Perez and Sharita and Rez is great friends, and so all those three together was trying to plot.
While we were at the scene, we received a clue that Gaines had a girlfriend that lived in Hollywood Hills. And when we got there, it turned out that his girlfriend was Sharitha Knight, who was the estranged wife of the owner of Death Row Records.
How about Rafael Perez?
Never heard of him until all the incidents happened.
Those guys, if you go back and watch the film, they was already stalking Pac, watching him. So that just tipped the iceberg when something happened. But there was a plan already to do something to him.
So why does everyone keep telling me that David Mack was working for you?
Yeah. I never heard that.
You've never heard that?
That he worked for me.
You've never heard that?
Wait a minute. Let me clear that up. I'm saying by anyone that's credible that will work around there or anything. Like I said, that was all investigated by LAPD. I turned over my payroll, everything.
3 different jailhouse informants who offered to wear a wire were all turned down by LAPD. A wire, say informants, that could have caught jailed officer Perez boasting about his involvement with Death Row Records and the Biggie Smalls murder.
You always will tell you, those are Reggie people.
Orlando wasn't even the shooter, you know? He was actually a good kid, too, you know? I'm quite sure they saw the first one, they saw the second one, because it's the same circle of people.
We had to see this judge today, who I've been in front of before. The atmosphere in this room in this deposition is pretty formal looking.
Right.
We're in a big, nice conference room. This judge is trying to help us.
Right.
Sitting there off the record, like giving me advice.
No, he ain't.
Yeah, he's sitting there saying, before we go on the record, let me give you some clues. And he's sort of telling me what I should say, and then what he's going to say, and this.
Wow.
Yeah.
On the criminal side, he's acknowledged that 57 cases involving 99 suspects are tainted either by perjured testimony, falsification of evidence, or probable cause.
A line police officer goes to the very heart, to the core of the criminal justice system. 99% of your cases, maybe that's an exaggeration, 90% at least, of your cases rely on the veracity of your police officer. If you cannot trust your police officer, you don't have a case. You don't have a criminal justice system.
You got a lot to cover up, y'all.
Freudian slip.
You got a lot to cover up.
It's the same people, same circle of people. It have nothing to do with me, you know?